Well, hello and welcome everybody to the 100 Rural Women podcast. And today I want to introduce you to Taneum. Taneum, and I've had the great opportunity to do a lot of collaborating with Taneum the last couple of years. And I just want to start this off with your bio on the website. So I'm just going to read through that quick because I think it does such a good job of capturing you, that you take pride in being a connector, developing positive relationships, with communities across the country. And you are based in Washington State. And I love that we can find you there with your knitting or a book close by. Also, that your work is informed by a lifelong interest in civics and the belief that everyone's voice matters. And I know you are a proud volunteer advisor for the Washington YMCA Youth Legislature. And that's, of course, where we mentor teens from across the state to engage in democracy. And that's a background I have too that we'll have to visit a little bit more, but that's a huge interest of mine. And as I said, we've had a great opportunity to collaborate this past year. And one of these days we're going to meet in person. That will be the best. But I just really want to thank you for taking the time today and being one of our inaugural guests on our podcast, which I'm super excited about getting moving on, because I just can't think of anything better to lift up women like you and share your story. So thank you, thank you, thank you. So we're just going to start out with a first question that I have that I want to start the podcast with. What's a lesson you learned from a grandmother or another influential older woman in your life?
Yeah, I love this question, and I'm really happy to be on the podcast and talking to you, Teresa. So thank you. Um, Grandmas are very special to me. I lived with my grandma up until very recently. I lived with her for about 5 years. I learned a lot, and I learned a lot more up close with my grandma, living with her compared to just having more of a distant relationship, which we were close before, but being roommates, we got even closer. So she taught me everything I know about gardening. I now know that the secret before you leave your house for any period of time is to clean your kitchen and everything, take all the stuff, garbage out, clean so that when you come back, you have a clean starting point. So that was a secret that I didn't know before. But really the thing that I learned a lot about is just use what you have until it truly no longer works. There are so many appliances and things that I think in this day and age, the new thing comes along and you just, oh, I'll get that new thing because it works better. Well, the old thing still works. I finally just upgraded one of my grandma's vacuum cleaners that hit its point, and I'm sure that thing was 40 years old, like older than me. So that's something that I now think about very differently.
I love
Yeah.
it. And how amazing that you got to live with your grandma for 5 years. That's incredible. That's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, because I work from home now, I still go to her house a couple, 2, 3 times a week and have my office at grandma's house, and I'm just very thankful for being as close to her as I am.
Yeah, I had special relationships with my grandmothers too, and I lost them too soon, but yeah, great memories and great lessons. So tell us a little bit about your connection to rural America.
Yeah, absolutely. So my family has actually both sides of my family, their rural roots are very central to the family narrative. It's something, especially on my mom's side, we talk about the ranch that my great grandma grew up on in South Dakota. And that is very, very much connected to who we are and how we think of ourselves as a family. In fact, Tina, my name is from Taneum Creek in Central Washington, where our
I
whole
love
family
it.
spent a lot of time. And so they borrowed the name for me. And we've got tons of stories like that in our family. My uncle's dog is named Dakota, lots of things like that. So the rural roots in our family on both sides are very strong. But I actually grew up in the suburbs of Seattle. And I've spent most of my time living in either a suburban or urban setting. And I got involved with rural America and all of the wonderful things that all the definitions of rural that you could possibly think of. These weren't really things that were on my mind before I started a job where I was organizing with people all around the country who wanted to lead civic programming in their community. So I was working with people all over the place in nearly every state, in the biggest urban metro settings to very small towns. And I learned through that process what rural America is really all about and everything that goes into keeping communities healthy and fun and loving, caring places. The rural organizers who I worked with, they knew how to do things where people in an urban setting sometimes struggled to figure out where to get started, what to work on. And that ignited my interest, I think, in getting more deeply familiar with what rural was. And I became familiar with Rural Assembly, where I now work, and have worked for 2-ish plus years, 2.5 years. And now that I'm working even more closely with people in rural places, I just continue to feel like that is what is up. That's the place to be. So that's kind of my connection. And you hear a lot about urban rural solidarity, of course, and uh, a lot of the time when I'm on a call, of course, I'm logging in from Seattle now, and it's sort of like, oh, I have to justify why I'm here, why I care, even if I live in a city. And that is manufactured, I think. We all care about usually the same things. And I think that you can do that from anywhere, and it's a lot more complicated than we put on paper.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I do think the rural and urban, there's so many, we have so many commonalities. Um, but I don't think people see that sometimes. And I think one of the things too that I'd love to have you visit a little bit more about is your interest in civic.
Mm.
And where'd that come from? And how did you end up sort of headed that direction?
It was by accident. I um I grew up in a family that loved listening to public radio. We always had the radio on, listening to local news, radio programs, whatever. And to me as a kid, that felt a little bit like torture. And to be in the car, trapped in the back seat, being forced to listen to Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me just was the worst possible scenario, it felt like as a kid. And but my family had a very clear interest in staying up to date on what was going on in the world. And they, as part of that, encouraged me, well, pushed me very firmly into this program through the YMCA called Youth in Government, which I'm still involved with now. And so the first year of being involved with that as a ninth grade student was just trying to get through it. And then went to our annual conference, which happens in May in Washington State every year, and we get to go to the state capitol. So about 400 students that year from 8th to 12th grade just roll into the state capitol and get to spend 4 days there. And that was a life-changing experience for me. So I participated in that program all through high school. When I went to college, I started thinking more about, well, how did I have this opportunity to participate in a program that was after school, that was a paid program that taught me my voice matters? And does everybody get to do that? Does who's not getting to do that? Where are populations more likely to get to do that? And from there, I started asking questions about voter turnout and all sorts of things. And then when I was looking at graduating college, I was like, well, what do I do with all this? And I just really it was so fortunate to find a job where I could continue working on those same things, understanding how we all relate to our communities and how we believe that we can have a say in what's going on.
I love it. And with youth in government, which of course is totally near and dear to my heart also.
Yes.
I was pretty active in Minnesota with it. I've loved just watching where students who I got to work with have gone. And I think one of the coolest things I got to do that I would like you to visit a little bit about is the national meeting. And tell me about that experience for you.
Yeah. The Conference on National
Hmm.
Affairs, I think you're referencing.
Yes.
So, um, actually, that was probably one of my early exposures to a very rural part of the country too, in North Carolina at the Blue Ridge Center, that the YMCA operates there in Black Mountain, North Carolina. Each summer, there's about a week-long conference that happens called the Conference on National Affairs, and most states which have a youth in government program, which is the majority, 30 or 40 some states, take a delegation anywhere from a couple of students all the way up to 25 students. And they all meet up in the mountains, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, which is just the perfect setting, and bring pieces of, well, not legislation, but proposals for how to make the country a better place and even some of international importance. And it's a great opportunity for young people to meet other young people from various parts of the country. I grew up in Washington State. I'm still here. And we all have the commonalities, but just the regional differences that you can really start to feel and be surprised by and get curious about. That's life changing, I think, for a lot of students. And I got to even go to university with some students who I had met from another state at the conference later. And then I got to advise a couple of years ago. I was one of the adult volunteer advisors leading the trip for Washington State, and watching it from that point of view, it's just astounding. I mean, if you have ever heard that teenagers are causing problems and lazy and troublemakers and, the root of all evil in our society, go witness something like this because they are deeply caring. They have brilliant ideas, well researched ideas. They want to talk to each other, learn about what's going on, and they just need support and resources to be able to do all of those things and to learn and grow into future policymakers or even just community members who are connected.
Just think that's such an important work, and I'm so glad you're still involved. And tell me, speaking of work, tell us a little bit about your work at Rural Assembly.
Yeah, so Rural Assembly is a program of the Center for Rural Strategies. And people may also be familiar with the Daily Yonder, our sister program within the Center for Rural Strategies. And what we focus on at Rural Assembly is supporting rural people and doers and organizers and people who love and care for rural places in being able to keep doing that for a long time. So we host a lot of gatherings online and in person, which at the heart of our work is staying inspired and encouraged. It gets rough out there. It is easy to get tired out when you're working hard. And the majority of what we do is designed around that. People have a huge amount of curiosity for what other people are doing. In fact, anytime we do a survey, the majority of people who come to our program say, I showed up because I wanted to learn about what other people are doing. And oh, by the way, they want to learn about you. And you have wonderful insight to offer anybody who's coming to the program. I firmly believe that. So I direct our programs and partnerships. So I was very, very happy a little over a year ago
Mm.
when we worked with you, Teresa, to bring morning connections to Rural Assembly. And that is my favorite Thursday morning ritual that we get to do, bring rural women together just to talk about what's on their hearts and minds. And it never fails to be a conversation that fills me up.
I'm with you on that too. I love Thursday mornings. That's the highlight of my week. So when you think about just some of your work. You've done a lot of different things, had a lot of different experiences. What are some of the most rewarding things that you've gotten to do so far in your career, your life?
Yeah. So, being with Rural Assembly, we're a national organization. And as such, from time to time, I get to go out and visit people who we work with. And I got to do that in another role in my career early on. And one of the most rewarding things I think is being able to get out of where I'm at, where I grew up and live still, and see other parts of the country and have people tell me from their point of view what is going on. I love anytime I get to drop in someplace and visit with somebody and they tell me, here's, anything from how geographically and geologically this region of the country was formed to here's really significant local history. Here's somebody who made this place what it is now. I think that there are so many places that I've gotten to go to in my work that I would be very unlikely to choose as a vacation spot. I just a couple weeks ago, I got to go to Ohio for the first time. I had never been to the state of Ohio, and through some other travel, I was able to detour and go. And it's so enriching to me to just experience other parts of the country. And a lot of what we try and do is communicate a message that each place where we all live, it's unique and it has this specific and beautiful social fabric and, setup, whatever it may be, different wonderful natural resources, whatever. But there's that common thread between all of our places. And I think that one of the most valuable experiences has been just seeing that over and over again and having the privilege of getting to know people who love their places, who love the people around them and want to share it. And I mean, I will always think about all the different places where I've gotten to go that just had never been on my radar personally, and how how important it is to get to witness those places.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think back to that whole travel piece and getting to see people's communities and where they live and how they do things. There's so many beautiful um, parts of our nation and internationally. So yeah, I'm all about travel. I love to travel. Um,
Yeah.
so growing up, and like you said, you're an NPR kid, had to torture of listening to Wait, Don't Tell Me. But did you ever think you'd be doing something like you're doing, or did you? What did you want to do
I
when you
didn't
grew up?
know I didn't know that there were as many options as there really are for what you could do for work. I think I thought there were those certain pathways that you were supposed to take or look into. I don't know. I never really had anything specifically in mind when I was growing up. I just think you kind of grow and find your path as you go along. At least I have. I think my 4th grade project when I had to pick a career was maybe a lawyer. And, I've got a bet with a friend of mine. She thinks I'm gonna go to law school one day. I tend to think not, but you never know. So I don't know. I just think that, finding the things that we spend our time on, it's just this series of growing. And there's a lot too, of course, for rural people, there's a lot that you got to roll up your sleeves and get done in addition to finding what fills you up. I think that we're really each lucky to find those spaces that we find personally rewarding, and to be able to have them be the things that financially sustain us and keep us going in a number of regards. So I still would like to know what I want to be when I grow up. And I think that there will be many, many, many answers to that by the time I'm old and gray.
Well, I still don't know what I want to be, and I'm way overgrown up. But I do think that one of the things I've realized, after this wild career I've had and all the things that I've gotten to do, is that you have so many transferable skills. And I think sometimes people get stuck that, "Well, this is what I know. How could I do that?" You have so many transferable skills. So, yeah, I'm always sort of like step out, take a chance, see what happens. But the way I did that was I went back to school. I went back to grad school, and I've done 4 different things since then. I had a
Yeah.
20-year career in the legislature, and then work in the legislature, and then I did like 4 different things. So I'm just like embrace and go for it. What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
And what's that look like for you?
Yeah. Well, as you read in my intro, I felt strongly enough to put this on my professional bio on my work website that I knit. So, and I'm wearing a knit sweater right now.
There you
I
go.
love to knit. And speaking of grandmothers, my grandma taught me how to knit. And so that is important to me. It's just a time when I'm knitting, it's a time for me to process. It's a creative outlet. I work with a lot of artists, and I think sometimes I've been asked, to name my artistic practice, and I always sort of tremble as I'm like, I knit, and to claim it in that way, but it really is something that is restorative to me when I'm knitting and working on something. The other stuff kind of fades away. I get to process my day. I get to think about what's weighing on my mind. And I think that's really what self-care should be about, is processing and caring for yourself and healing from all the pain and hard stuff that we're going through in the world and as a society. Um we're reading right now. So our Morning Connections group at Rural Assembly grew into a book discussion group. I know that 100 Rural Women does a book discussion group too. And this one emerged from a conversation that we were having in Morning Connections. And the book that we're reading is The Night is Long, but Light Comes in the Morning by Catherine Meeks. And first of all, I recommend this book to everyone. It has been an incredibly transformative book to read. And we've had so far 4 discussion sessions, and we're gonna have a few more. But the concept in the book is we have to heal ourselves and our internal community, is what Catherine Meeks calls it, in order to be well. And she specifically frames this around racial healing. And so for me as a white person, that's been really transformative to read. And it applies to everything in our lives. So when I think of self care, I think of the time we spend tending to ourselves on that deep emotional level so that we're ready to deal with everything else that's coming at us in the world. And so knitting is the surface part of that answer, and to me it extends much more deeply into I into those emotional kind of wells. So, what do I do for fun? That, and I don't know if that's a fully fun answer, but um I spend a lot of time with my family and do a lot of reading and love to travel anywhere globally, or just even in my neighborhood. I try and get outside and walk the trails around me. There's a fabulous park nearby called Carkeek Park where recently I've been trying to go at least once a week, if not twice, to see the salmon coming up Piper's Creek.
Cool.
So, um, things like that.
I love it. And that's something, being from Minnesota, we have a lot of water and a lot of lakes, but that whole salmon run piece, I've never experienced that. I would love to. And
It is special to
right.
see. The salmon work so hard to get where they're going, and there's been some cool environmental restoration going on in Piper's Creek specifically by me, so that we're able to see more and more salmon every year.
I love it. And this is another thing that I think we touched on a little bit, but when you think about everything that's going on in the world right now, it's a lot of chaos and um, can be very overwhelming for me for sure. So I always like to ask folks, how are you navigating and how do you, I mean, this really feeds into self-care and all those pieces, but how do you stay positive when things are so chaotic and uncertain? Where do you find your your positive ways? How do you do that?
Yeah. For me, I have to have connection to other people to stay positive. I think on my own, I probably would be a little bit stagnant of that doom and gloom and dread and what can we really do and spin myself up in circles. But the magic in saying just that to anyone is, I don't know how we get through this, is then you have the wonderful imagination and energy of that other person who can help you. So for me, it's about staying connected to people, and it's easy to be disconnected. Uh, we can live a lot of our lives online. We can go around not talking to another real human if we want to. But the second that you go on a walk, uh, preferably through the woods with another person, if you aren't hitting on those topics of like, really, how are you feeling and what do we do and how do we get through this, I would be shocked. And um, for me, I look to all of the wisdom and encouragement of the people around me, to keep me going, and just the belief in the good people who I know, that that there is a whole world of possibility being imagined.
Yeah, absolutely. And uh, that navigating piece I always think is really important for people to hear about because I think everybody sort of has different ways to do it. I think is a big thing for me too, finding that hope and finding the possibilities. So I think that's a great piece. And I think about rural women right now, and I think about our country, and I think just on the public sector side, and in the getting our whole goal at 100 Rural Women is how do we get more women serving in more formal leadership roles or supporting someone who wants to serve in those roles, and that goes across sector also. But we really have a gap on the elected side. But when you think about rural women, what do you think? Number one, we should be doing to better support rural women, and
Yeah. Well, there are a number, I think, of very clear policies that we could look into rolling out in a more genuine way. We should be having more access to healthcare rather than less, including mental health care and particularly maternal care. So we could go down that side, but I think that at the heart of that policy suggestion is what I would say more broadly is that we need to have a reckoning as a society, as a country, where we actually see the humanity and the people around us, and to see the rural women, the young rural women, the old rural women, the midlife rural women who are just giving so much of themselves, their love, their care, their expertise, their hard work. Seeing the depth of that, I think, is what we have to do collectively to see the humanity in the people around us, because I think most of our problems stem from not caring about us, any group of people, whatever it is, not prioritizing them. There not being enough money to lobby for any given group to get what we actually need. So to me, there's a laundry list of things that I think would be pretty straightforward. I mean, complicated to roll out, but as an idea, pretty straightforward. Healthcare being pretty close to the top of that list, if not the top. And at the heart of it, just see people care about people. I think we all want to be cared about. Personally, I know it feels very good to me when people show me love and care. And I think if we could just extend that, I think that would be a much better world. And that's why, I mean, I keep coming back to morning connections, Teresa. You started a very good thing. But morning connections is 30 minutes every week where I know there are about 20 women who come to our sessions on and off regularly, plus a whole bunch more who come every once in a while. And they just know it's going to be 30 minutes where we can pour into them. They can talk to each other about problems they're having. We can talk through um, success stories that have recently happened, share the good news. Just we can have 25 minutes of, oh my gosh, what do we do? And a space like that, that's the support that rural women need. Interpersonally, right? And we got to also make sure that we're doing those things beyond that on the policy side.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's when I talk about morning connections being my favorite time of the week because you never really know where the conversation's going to take you. And I think the thing we haven't probably been the best at, because I try and really keep it organic, but it's like quantifying all the connections, because that's my favorite part. It's like so many, and when somebody needs something, it's just amazing to hear people say, "Oh, I can help with that. Oh, I
Yeah.
know somebody will help with that." So, so I love that piece, and I think that that just keeps me um, hopeful and super positive about you know the world and as you said the humanity particularly I think because it's tough with politics and policy these days, yeah, so that I'm just a believer in relationships. If you can get to know somebody first before some of the divisive issues come in that aren't you'll listen to each
Yeah.
other, and that's always my goal in life. I like to learn, and I think you're a learner too, and I think if we can all figure out things that we can agree on, and figure out how to work together, and maybe we'll listen to each other more. So I think that's a big piece, and I also think too about how do we better mentor young women, and what does that
Mm.
look like, and that's always a big interest. And really, what gives you hope for the future?
Yeah. So, I mean, day to day, I think it's easier to access and harder to access that hope. It really depends. But Thursdays are the day that keep me going because in the morning I've got morning connections and in the evening I have my youth and government group that I advise. And so, I am tired by the end of the day, but it has been a good day. And with the young people who I work with, we've made it a point at the end of our meetings lately to ask them we our meetings of our delegation here in my neighborhood part of town are small. It's under 10
Hmm.
students. But we always ask, okay, what do you want to talk about next week? And Teresa, they come out with hard hitting questions and topics to talk about. Again, like I said before, if anybody thinks that teenagers as a whole can be just this disengaged, apathetic demographic, if we took the time to stop and actually have a conversation, I think most people would be surprised. And that's what gives me hope is when you get to talk to anybody and really ask them, what is it that you think we should be talking about? Or what do you care about? Or what do you think is wrong that we need to tend to? That is what gives me hope, because people just have this relentless spirit for tackling problems. It's hard, it's not fun a lot of the time, and it can be exhausting, but most people most of the time want to make things better. And that is what gives me hope, because to know that when I get tired, somebody else is going to be there with me. A colleague and friend, Ash Hansen at the Department of Public Transformation, she and I and Maya Williams, based out of Winona, Minnesota, the three of us led a session at the Radically Rural Conference. Let's see, in October. We It was on ritual and how rural ritual can strengthen communities and practices. And Ash led this really amazing activity at the outset where we started humming together. And we started out humming and we kept humming. And eventually somebody would have to take a breath, right? But we were in this beautiful big group where if I had to stop and take a breath, the hum would not lose steam and keep going. And it was just this beautiful, demonstration of what that looks like when we work together. And that type of thing gives me a lot of hope.
I love it. And the radically rural, I've got to get to that conference. I've wanted to go and it never works out. So I was so happy to see you guys were presenting there and to see the follow up, because I just think they're doing incredible work. And I'm with you. It's young people are what give me hope for the future. And at 100 Rural Women, it's students. We work with so many students, and that's where I'm like, okay, we're going to be okay, because these young people they've got it together. It's just figuring out how can we best support them. And speaking of being young, what advice, and this is sort of, I love to ask this, what advice would you give your younger self?
Mm. Hmm. You know, some advice that I got when I was young was to be my own best advocate. And that has stuck with me in a big way. The idea that, you know, no one else necessarily is going to be looking out for you. And you need to take the reins, make sure you get what you need. But now where I'm at, where I'm at now, I would put some caveats on that, because it's not just we're all out here trying to, you know, win life and take what we need. It's not like that. And that's not the spirit that the advice was given to me anyway in the first place. But what I would add now is the people who care and who you can trust will make themselves known. And uh when they do, those people are a real gift. And so be your own best advocate, but assemble your squad. Who can you call crying after a meeting? Who can you call to scream about whatever frustrating thing, or to say, oh my gosh, I have the most amazing news? And those people are going to be the people who also say, hey, I think you deserve more. I think you deserve better than that. Or here's what I see for you. I think you could actually go in this direction and it would be amazing. So be your own best advocate, but have your backup ready to step in when you need to find find your way. That would be my advice.
When we first started 100 Rural Women, mentorship is the key. It's always that thread that ties everything together. But one of our board members here, Charlier, I remember the first time I met her, she said that she always had this vision of this circle, that you need 5 people around you at all times that can tell you the truth, that you can bounce things off, that you can celebrate with, that you can cry with, all those pieces. And I think I see sort of that circle of people that you need to have, your squad. I love that. And Anything else, like when you think about younger people, I mean, that's such great advice. Anything else that you would share with like a young rural woman trying to navigate and, move into, leadership or community engagement? Anything else that you'd want to share with them?
Mhm. Yeah. I think that my advice would be know your values. No, well, know your value, but know your values. Take time to think about what your core set of values is so that you can continue to develop the sense of integrity. Why are you doing anything that you're doing? Where is it coming from? What is it connected to? I had some mentors who encouraged me to go through and discover what I would name as my own core values, and it's an emergent process for sure. It's something I'm still chewing on, and I look back at it every once in a while and I'm like, "Well, I don't know about that one anymore." But, finding those connection points so that when you're faced with hardship, which you will be, you can think, "How am I gonna respond?" And you can have that fallback, um, to figure out how you want to move through the world, because it can get tricky and we can lose our way easily and make decisions that we maybe wouldn't have stood by, and get pressured into, going certain directions. And when you can name, here's what I stand for, here's how I want to move through the world, I think that is a fantastic guide for whatever situation you might be in. So take that time.
And anything else that you want to add, Tatum? I mean, I just can't thank you enough. You're so amazing, and this time together, I've just learned more and more about you. But anything else that you'd want to share?
Well, I want to know what you've been reading lately or watching, because I need a recommendation for my next book.
Oh my
So this
gosh.
is a selfish question.
Yeah, yeah. What have I been reading? We just read. I gotta pull it up. Isn't that funny? You get blanks here.
Mhm. I know I'm
Um,
putting you on the spot. You
that's
didn't get the
good.
chance
That's good.
to.
Minnesota author. Oh my gosh! If you have read any of Louise Erdrich's books, if you haven't, you need to. But we just read The Mighty Red, and I would
Mm,
highly recommend that. She's a Minnesota author, grew up in the Dakotas, but lives in Minnesota and has a bookstore in Minneapolis called the Birch Bark. But I love her. I love the way she writes. She hits like a lot of, family topics and issues, but she always has humor. I
mhm,
just sort of, so it's with reading, I like to, I read tragedy. I read all kinds of fiction. I read all kinds of pieces like that. But it's that I love authors that can, within some of that, they can add in humor. So that's like a huge, huge thing for me is finding authors that do that. And
yeah.
with our book group, we do nonfiction one month, fiction the next month. And then we did a book of essays by Anna Farrow Henderson. And we actually had the author, we had her join our book group. So it was really fun to have her talk. But she talked about, it was a very different format for us and, a book of essays, but it was super cool because she just talked about her life as a scientist, a mom, and policy, and how that all is interwoven. So I think that's another. Core Samples was the name of that book. She was incredible. So I've been trying to discover and reach out to different types of authors, and also here I'm not a nonfiction reader, but I've become a nonfiction reader. So that's the
Yeah.
other good thing about a book group. It gets you to read things that you never would, that you'd never go self-select. So that's sort of what I've been up to. I'm still a reader. I'm a tactile person. So there's nothing better than a nice book with nice paper in it. I listen a lot to podcasts and do all those things, but there's still something about a book. I love a book. I love a book.
Mhm.
I love it.
Yes, I
I
do
love it.
too. I have to walk to the library maybe after our call and go pick up a hold before it goes away from me.
There you
So
go. There you go. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and, what a pleasure to get to spend this time with you, and I'm so excited to be able to share this podcast out. So thanks, Tatum.
Thanks, Teresa.